Hello, everyone, and welcome to Rise Zion. My name is Seth. I hope you're all having a fantastic Friday. We made it to the weekend. Yay. All right, so just a few days ago, Elder Bednar and the church simultaneously posted a video about how the church uses tithing. As many of you know, there has recently been a lot of controversy surrounding the lawsuit filed by James Huntsman, who is the brother of John Huntsman Jr. The Huntsmans are a very prominent and very wealthy family in Utah. Now, John Huntsman Jr. was the governor of Utah for quite a while John Huntsman Sr. was a successful businessman who made millions of dollars creating a chemical company that creates unique plastics and food containers. So just to give some background information into the case and some background information into James's personal life that led him down this sad, sad path of suing the church. Now, James Huntsman was a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints his entire life. He even served a mission where he said that he tearfully bore his testimony of certain historical events, which he later said didn't exactly happen the way he had imagined. It was much later when he started to discover what he described as cracks in the church's version of events of history. Namely, he mentioned the various first vision accounts and the fact that he was unaware of the translation of the Book of Mormon via a seer stone versus the Urim and Thummim. Issues which are really not issues at all for people who have a more nuanced view of historical events. Of course, he frames this as if the church was intentionally misleading him on the various and interesting details of church history that you aren't necessarily going to learn in Sunday school. I've often said that the more that you learn about church history, the more you discover that the church is true. However, in other interviews, James makes no mention of these particular issues, but instead focuses on other anti-Mormon talking points. So it's clear to me that instead of doing his own research, James was getting his information from anti-Mormon sources. It appears that during discussions with certain family members and friends of the Huntsmans, that they directed him to listen to the Mormon Stories podcast. And from there, everything just went downhill. Instead of listening to faith-promoting content, James Huntsman instead decided to seek information from a clearly very anti-Mormon source of information, masquerading as impartial and truthful to unsuspecting victims. And it was because of this, and partially because of his own pride, I believe that James eventually lost his faith completely. Unfortunately, James became very bitter, which seems to be a common fruit of John Dehlin's discipleship, and he began to seek revenge against the church. James stated that his goal was to leave the church, but to give the bouncer a black eye on his way out of the club that had given him a bad experience.
So the impetus for the lawsuit, I can't ignore the fact that there was some piece of motivation behind that I wanted to give the bouncer a bloody nose exiting the bar where I had a bad experience.
And so James decided to file a lawsuit against the church. It was his goal to hurt the church in the worst way he could, and so he sent a demand letter seeking the return of approximately $5 million he had paid in tithing because he alleged that the church had used tithing funds on commercial endeavors such as the City Creek Mall, specifically mentioned in this letter. He claimed that the lawsuit was never meant to become public, a story which I highly, highly doubt. He claimed that he sent the letter in the hopes that the church would recognize the Huntsman name and immediately capitulate to his demands that they return the tithing money that he claims they somehow misspent. In my opinion, this is a rather arrogant attitude to have, the idea that the church should show some kind of deference to you because of your last name. Given all of the confusion and misinformation that this public trial brought, Elder Bednar has released a video on his Instagram, and it was simultaneously released by the church on their YouTube, that was recorded back in 2023 during the Silicon Slope Summit, in which Elder Bednar describes very succinctly exactly how the church uses its funds when the interviewer asked him impromptu about the issues surrounding the church's tithing use. And what an impressive and detailed answer. Let's go ahead and play clip number 1.
You're getting a lot of heat for people telling you how to spend the money of the church. How do you think about that, or how can others really understand the scale of this?
Let me address 2 things. We have 4 overarching responsibilities. The mission of the church is to help people learn about and live the teachings of Jesus Christ, to share that message with the world, to strengthen and unite families, and to care for the poor and the needy.
All right, so Elder Bednar, and I imagine that all of the leaders of the church have front and center in their minds these four overarching responsibilities for these sacred funds. The mission of the church, and therefore how it uses its money, is 1, to help people learn about and live the teachings of Jesus Christ, 2, to share that message with the world, 3, to strengthen and unite families, and 4, to care for the poor and the needy. But Elder Bednar's answer gets even more impressive going forward.
Now, we do this all over the world. So in terms of scope, that's the answer. The people who want to tell us how to spend the money, I would just emphasize one undergirding principle. The assets of the church are primarily income consuming. They are not income producing. 20,000 meeting houses and facilities. They're all paid for when they're dedicated. All of the utilities are paid for. They're not passing a plate or collecting money in local congregations. That's all done through the tithes that the members of the church pay all over the world. But you've got fixed costs in the maintenance, the utilities, all of those things for all of those buildings. 315 temples in operation, announced, in design, being renovated or under construction. 4 major institutions of higher education. You don't have to be an accountant to figure out. Those are some big dollars.
It's incredibly remarkable that Elder Bednar was prepared to such a degree to talk about all of these numbers. Now, for some additional context, this was back in 2023, and the so-called whistleblower leaked the church's financial statements to the IRS. So Elder Bednar was very, very prepared for this topic to come up in a business summit. But in any case, Elder Bednar is laying out the case that the majority of the church's assets are primarily income consuming. What that means is that even though the church has investment properties or assets that bring in money so the church can help support itself, the grand majority of these assets do not make money. And that is very important when establishing the church's tax-exempt status. The church needs to show that it isn't just a money-making venture, that the church's charitable mission is being fulfilled, and that it is spending the money on church buildings, charity, food, and the needy, and education. And he is saying that all of the church's income-making assets, such as the City Creek Mall, are designed to supplement that goal. And this is very important because James Huntsman in this lawsuit is claiming that the funds of the church are being misused because the church just wants to make more money. And that is using tithing funds on those buildings, a claim which we will show is false coming right up.
So when people say, well, what do you do with all that money? Well, there's an episode in the Old Testament about Joseph, who interpreted a dream for the Pharaoh, that there were 7 years of plenty and 7 years of famine. And in the years of plenty, you better prepare for the years of famine. So people want to speculate about the size of the reserve and all that kind of stuff. $1 billion assisting poor and needy people all over the world annually, $1 billion for education. And it's necessary to maintain the mission of this church, which is to bless the lives of individuals and families.
So you feel good about where you're at? You feel like it's prudent and wise? And
I think it would be imprudent and unwise not to have a reserve.
All right, so there you have it. Yet another reason why the church saves its money instead of spending all of it is because of the story of Joseph of Egypt. It is wise, it's very wise to save for a rainy day and to be able to cover operational costs of the church and to continue to take care of the needy in the event that some disaster were to occur, such as a drought or an economic downturn. As you know, we are currently living in the times prior to the second coming. Trials and tribulations are ongoing before the Lord will come again. We can expect continued fires, droughts, plagues, earthquakes, wars, rumors of wars, pestilences, and even inflation. Additionally, at some point, the church will need to build Zion, which is the city in Jackson County. So that's something also to keep in mind. Furthermore, it's extremely, extremely foolish to have the expectation that the church should spend all of its money on one cause or another when it can more effectively fulfill its charitable mission through leveraging investments. Would you prefer that the church is bankrupt like the federal government? And again, I think that the church's example here is a great example for each and every one of us to do as well. If you haven't already, make it a priority to get your finances in order. Make it a priority to leverage investment opportunities for your retirement for your retirements and for a personal rainy day fund, perhaps. Again, I'm not qualified to give financial advice. You can seek that on your own, but I think that it's a generally good advice to get your finances in order and to make it a priority so that you can retire. I think that a lot of people my age, millennials, are kind of are going to be in for a hard pill to swallow when they come to the retirement age and they don't have money saved away in any investments, so they can't support themselves. So, I mean, what we're looking at, it seems to me, is a generation that will likely be working until they die, or working much, much later than when most of the earlier generations had already retired. But in any case, that's just sort of a tangent that reminds me we can take the example of the church and wisely invest our own money as well. In any case, back to the main point at hand. One of the main contentions of James Huntsman has supposedly been that he doesn't necessarily care that the church owns investment properties, but he says that he cares that the church lied to him about tithing money being used for investment purposes. He claims that the church was unclear about how they would use tithing. However, the courts clearly disagree, and I'm sure that the Salt Lake Tribune is very, very disappointed. Peggy Fletcher, I'm sure, is crying salty, salty tears at the moment. But let's go ahead and read from the Salt Lake Tribune an article by Tony Semerand written in January 31st of 2025 this year. He writes, an appeals court has thrown out Utah James Huntsman's fraud lawsuit against the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints over millions of dollars in tithing. In a unanimous ruling, the Ninth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals found no reasonable juror could have concluded that the Utah-based faith misrepresented the source of its funds used to spend $1.4 billion on the building and development of City Creek Center, a church-owned mall and residential towers in downtown Salt Lake City. The church had long explained that the source of the reserve funds included tithing funds, according to an opinion summary issued Friday by the Ninth Circuit, and Huntsman had not presented evidence that the church did anything other than what it said it would do. So, okay, so this is a part of the reason why I think that James's intention was never to keep this conflict between him and the church private. And I don't think that his lawyers did either. They had to have known from the beginning that that they had no case going forward. I think that the goal was never to get the tithing money back. I think that after it became clear that the church wasn't going to cave to his demand letter, just because his last name was Huntsman, that he wanted to cause as much damage as possible to the church, and he wanted to make this as public as possible, which they did. In any case, and I think that's why he's done so many interviews with as many unfriendly sources to the church as possible, such as the Salt Lake Tribune, for example, and even John Dehlin. Well, let's continue reading the article here. He says, Huntsman, while living in California, sued the church in 2021, alleging he was fraudulently misled into donating to the faith by statements from church leaders, including then President Gordon B. Hinckley, that no tithing would be used on commercial projects. Although the church stated that no tithing funds would be used to fund City Creek, the court's majority opinion said it also clarified that earnings on invested reserve funds would be used. Okay, so again, just to emphasize that the court ruled here, the court found that the church didn't use tithing funds for the City Creek Mall, but that the church used income from its reserve funds. And they ruled that the church made that transparently clear from the very beginning. The California-based appellate judges agreed 11-0, again, a unanimous decision, that Huntsman hadn't proved fraud under the state constitution and that his lawsuit should be dismissed. But they split on the bearing the U.S. Constitution protections for religion had on the case and where courts might be forbidden from probing. Continue later on, we read down near the bottom, in an emailed statement, church spokesperson Doug Anderson noted the decision was unanimous and that it reaffirmed that tithing donations are considered sacred and are dedicated to advancing the church's global religious mission. We welcome this decision, Anderson said, insomuch as the church has consistently affirmed that the funds used for the City Creek project came from the earnings of invested reserve funds and not from donations. All right, so that's it for today, you guys. Before you go, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Our goal is to reach 10,000 subscribers so that these important messages can reach as many people as possible through the YouTube algorithm. Thank you so much. And until next time, bye.